Good morning. Welcome back to Rich Artist Fridays. How's everybody doing? End of the week. We made it another week. That's crazy. For everybody that's new here, hi everybody on Instagram Live. My name is Sophie. I am a beauty and fashion photographer in New York City. I'm also the founder of the Rich Artist Program, and we do Rich Artist Fridays every Friday, which is our 30-minute quickies where we talk about anything concerning being a freelance artist and building your own business and wanting to do commercial photo shoots or high-paying private clients, how to feel empowered in your business, how to find a balance between being an entrepreneur and being an artist, because it's something that I didn't get taught throughout the entirety of my career, whether it was in college or assisting other photographers, being a lighting tech, digitech, intern, which we're going to talk about today. Nobody really showed me how to actually run a business. And this is not a business course per se, but I wanted to sort of open up that conversation because all artists, I think, deal with similar things when it comes to like, how do I reach out, or how do I get noticed by the brands that I want to work with? How do I present my portfolio? How do I carry myself in a rate negotiation? Like all of these things I think are on our minds, but we don't really have a mentor per se that can sort of take us by the hand and show us how to navigate that in a confident and authentic way that we feel like we're still being the artists that we are and we're not turning into marketing people or whatever the the apprehension is that might come up along the way. And with growing success comes growing hurdles, so I want to have a continued conversation about these kind of topics that are on your guys' mind, that are on my mind. And then every once in a while we just do fun story times like the one today, because a lot of the opportunities that I was given, that I was lucky enough to have, really shaped the way that my career ended up looking down the road. And had I not had these opportunities, I don't know if I would have known how to navigate some of the situations that came up in my career the way that I did, had I not been able to observe, really successful professionals in the way that they do it. And I know that not everybody has the privilege of being able to do like an unpaid 6-month internship or to be on these really big commercial photo sets. And that's totally okay. Like you can be as successful of an artist as you dream of being. And that's why I'm here, to let you guys sort of partake in the experiences that I have made so that you can learn from them. You can take away, what I got to take away. Maybe you can avoid some of the mistakes that I had to make. And also just to share and to no longer gatekeep, because I found that with the older generation of artists, there was so much gatekeeping, and there was a lot of people that I feel like almost sort of put hurdles in younger creatives' ways because they had to fight really hard to get what they had accomplished. And um, there was such a strong competitive mindset that I felt like, you know, yeah, like there's not enough room for everybody at the top. And had I taken everybody's advice that was given to me, I would still be an assistant today. And today I want to talk about what the beginning of entering the commercial photo and fashion industry space was like for me. We've done one story time about this already, and it's on my YouTube if you guys haven't watched it. But for anybody that's sort of not up to speed, when I was still in college, I went to college in Berlin for photography. It was mandatory for us to either do study abroad for 6 months or an internship. And I landed like a really coveted internship with a photographer here in New York City. And I was lucky enough that he also owned a photo studio. So on the days where I was on set with him, I got to sort of play fly on the wall with other photographers that were shooting at the studio space, which was so valuable to me and really maximized the 6 months that I had in order to get trained by the lighting techs and the digitechs and his equipment manager, and getting to see the back of the house office as well, like the way that his own managers and assistants ran the studio space, and then also his own production. So like in the back of the studio, there was an office that had typically like 3 employees working at desktops. And those were the people that were running the operations, like managing the bookings for the studio when he was renting it out to other photographers. But then there was also always one or two people that were just managing his own stuff. And this was not like his agents or something. His agent wasn't in-house. But these were the like sort of the middle people between him and his agents, or like the producers for the next job that he was doing, that were managing his calendars and all of the emails that were coming in. And when I first applied for the internship with him, like that was one of the people that I first got to like be on a Zoom call with before I ever even got to meet him or talk to him or something like that. So that was really interesting for me to see. And when I was thinking about what I learned during that time, you know, later on I went on to being an assistant, but I kind of wanted to focus it back on being an intern because that's really where it all started for me. I'm trying to remember how much of this I shared with you guys the first time we did a story time, so I'm sorry if I repeat myself on some of these things. When I first arrived and I started interning for this photographer, there was a lot of things that I hadn't anticipated to learn, or that I hadn't anticipated to be part of this world. Like I said, I had never been on a big commercial photo set before. Like I didn't know what a producer did. I didn't know what an art director is. And this might be surprising to some of you guys, but I wasn't taught this stuff in college. And until I was in the room, I was like, oh, there's so many people, so many different job positions. I didn't know what a digitech did, you know? So that was one of the first things I learned, was sort of like, who are all of these people and who belongs to the photographer, and who does the photographer listen to, who listens to the photographer. One thing that was really surprising to me when I first arrived was that, you know, the photographer that I was interning for, on the days that we were running productions, he was like minimally involved. Which doesn't mean that he didn't do any work, but on the days that we were actually shooting, you know, what was surprising for me to see is that like he would arrive so much later than everybody else on set, and he would be doing so much less than what I had thought a photographer that works like that such high paying jobs would be doing the day of. Like his job was to just sit there and take the photos, and oftentimes, you know, depending on what they were shooting, it was like the camera was set up on a tripod for him, his digitech had already framed the shot for him, the light was all set up, and he would just come in and shoot, and that's all he did. And then as soon as the shoot wrapped, he got up and he got to leave. Like he wouldn't even stay there to like oversee the breakdown. He wasn't there to oversee the setup. I very quickly learned that obviously he wasn't just like showing up and doing the thing. Part of his job was to do a lot of the legwork ahead of time. So, you know, what I realized is like, oh, he has already gone through the creative deck. He's already told his lighting director like exactly what he wants set up, how he wants it set up, or at least sort of the direction that he wants it in. And then when he would come on set, he would make adjustments or make suggestions or something like that. But I think one of the biggest assets that this photographer had was that he had such an incredible team of people that knew what they were doing, even without him there to manage them. Whether it was, you know, setting up the lighting curve, like his digitech knew exactly how this photographer liked his images to look. Like he had a very specific look that we would usually put into capture one that was already set up for him when he showed up. His lighting oftentimes was like, I'd say like a similar approach, even though it varied from job to job. It was so useful for me to see the scale of the lighting setups and how much of a difference it made in photos, you know. And I think I'm gonna do a completely separate Rich Artist Friday on lighting, even though I'm not gonna, you know, I can't just like teach you just the technique of it. But I think learning to see light in a certain type of way is what makes a difference, regardless of what your resources are or the size of your studio. But what I realized by observing this guy working was that the size of the equipment was what made the light what it was, and the space that he had at his, I know I'm like contradicting myself, but like there is something to be said about the scale within which you can create a room filled with light, especially when you're trying to emulate natural daylight, which most productions look like that. And I had no idea, you know. And when I first started as an intern, I was mostly shadowing the lighting tech, so like the photo assistants that were setting up the lighting gear, which was such a physical job. And I had never even had to handle equipment of that scale, and it was so heavy, and I had no idea how to set it up, and I had to learn, like, I really had to learn on-set safety when I first arrived, because if you set something up wrong and it falls over, you could literally kill somebody, or it'll cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars with some of these lights if they get damaged. So the first couple of lessons were all very like technical things of like how to set this up, and also just how to stay out of the way, which I learned, or which I was taught in maybe not the nicest way. You know, it was very harsh in the beginning, being like, know your place and stick to it. Like, don't get in the way, don't be heard, don't be seen. That was a tough pill to swallow because I had never been put in a situation where I was treated that way. Obviously later on, like, I realized that, yeah, it does make a difference if you're in the way or if you're giving your opinion, while the Macy clients that this guy earns like hundreds of thousands of dollars from every year is there, like, they don't want the intern to be like, hey, I love the way that looks. Like, that's not your place. But the way that that was communicated was certainly interesting, which I also believe is very much like an, like, sort of an older generation of that industry is very, I don't know what the word for it is, hierarchical and sexist at times, and domineering. But you know, a little bit down the road, a couple years later, I that definitely changed. My experience changed. I was on all female sets, and the sets that I run now, like, the tone in the room is so different. And yet learning how to sort of fit into that hierarchy ultimately, I think, helped as well, because there's a good reason as to why when you have like 80 people on set, you need to know who to be listening to, and who, like, you know, who your boss is listening to, and who tells who what to do, because if we're all following each other and we're like, you know, nobody's taking charge, and the end product definitely suffers if you don't have somebody like leading a team. But obviously there's different ways of how to do that. Something else that I was really surprised to learn was how important appearances were, especially for the photo crew. So, and I don't know if this is like an outdated thing. I honestly don't think so, but what I mean with appearances was that, like, the way that the photographer appeared, and like how professional he appeared and how sought after he appeared to the client was everything. Like, us as the photo crew, we were only allowed to wear black, and that was one because you don't want to be like a bouncing board of light when you're like standing close to the model. Like, if you're wearing orange and you're close to the model, your model's literally going to be orange, or if you're wearing white, you're reflecting light that you shouldn't be reflecting. So, but it was also so that we all looked sort of like there was, that we were all like in unison, that we all looked the same, and it was easier to tell, like, oh, okay, this is the photography crew. That the client was being kept sort of a little bit at a distance from where the photographer was sitting on set, so that the photographer could have an exchange with his digitech that the client wasn't necessarily able to overhear. Because sometimes, like, let's say the camera is glitching and the photographer doesn't really know how to fix it. Like, that's what the digitech is there for. The digitech's job is to be an expert at the computer and the camera that we're operating, and that he can quickly grab it and fix it without the client even noticing that anything was ever wrong. So, like, the appearance of like everything running perfectly and running smoothly was so important, and it was so like protected by the photographer. I don't know if this also had something to do with the tone in the room, but if you have a client on set that is paying you like $150,000 to shoot their campaign, they sort of expect this big show. in a sense that like the photographer comes in and like the $50,000 camera that we're using is like in this like, you know, like hard pelican case, and it's like all like the guys walk in and it looks like you know, those people from the bank that are like chained to their suitcase, like that kind of thing. And this wasn't just this one photographer. Like I saw this with other photographers I worked for later as well. It was sort of like this a little bit of a show of like, oh, I'm not just a photographer that shows up with my camera like strapped over my shoulder. It was like a big deal once the photographer was on set, and he was catered to by his whole crew and everybody around him, like to the extent where like if he had to go lay on the floor, an assistant would like dive to put something in between the photographer and the floor, which might seem silly, and it did seem silly seeing it because like I was always like, oh, I sort of pride myself in not being fragile and in like not being afraid to get my hands dirty and stuff. But on the other side, it was sort of like, yeah, if you're a photographer that is valued at that level and you're getting paid that sort of money, you want people to think of you as such, and you want to be perceived in that way. And there's a reason why you're hiring a crew to cater to your every need, because your presence and what you are contributing as the like the leader of this crew and as one of the like main important people on the set, you sort of earn the right to have everything you need be catered to you, because it creates a perfect environment for you to do what you're there to do, which is take the actual photos. And that took a while for me to understand, because when I first saw that, I was like, he's literally just pushing a button. Like I could literally sit where he is and push the button, and like it wouldn't make a difference who's sitting there. But in the end, it does make a difference who's sitting there, because the whole scenario that is built around this photographer, the whole crew, they're all just there because of him. Like he has gotten to a point in his career where he has earned the right to just show up and have everything be the way that he wants it to be, because he already did the legwork for it to be set up that way. He already found the people that know him to that extent. He has already laid the groundwork of who he is as this creative that is getting hired for hundreds of thousands of dollars, if that makes sense to you guys. And I do think it's changing a little bit in the industry because budgets are changing, and I think the way that business relationships are being formed is changing. With this generation of artists that I assisted, it was very like you were the artist, you had an agent, and you were sort of this coveted talent. And if a client wanted to work with you, they had to go through so many people. Now, obviously, that's still the case, and people still have managers, people still have agents, but I think the way that clients form relationships with their artists changes. I think clients are a lot more inclined to invest and uphold a relationship with a photographer if they feel like they know the person, and that the artist is a little bit more accessible to them, same way as, you know, campaigns wanting to make the clients, where like, you know, their customers feel like the brand is accessible to them. Like if we look at social media these days, like you get so much like perfect imperfection in terms of how brands are creating content. Like they're more like entertainment platforms at this point rather than oh, sorry guys, with the did it again, didn't I? With the live, turn off my Wi-Fi. There we go. You know, in a way that they're making the customer feel like they're fully transparent with who they are as a brand and as an like a, you know, a company, and who the people are behind the scenes and who's running it, because we all kind of want access to that now. And I think the same thing is happening with artists. And yet, if you are working at that level, there like there is a reason as to why there is a certain perceived distance between the photographer and the client, and how available the photographer is to the client, because like you have a team to run, like you have so many people that are relying on you for this job. Like if you don't get rehired for this like $150,000 campaign, none of your assistants are working. So I remember with these jobs, it was such a big deal to make sure that the client had everything that they could possibly want, down to the catering needing to be on point. Like this guy used to hire a DJ to DJ his sets all day long, just because like then you could sort of customize the mood, and the DJ would be like, okay, now we're shooting, and he's like pumping the music, and he needs the model to be like, you know, a little bit uninhibited. So he's like pushing the volume and giving her something that makes her feel sexy and confident. And then the minute that they got the shot, and the photographer is like meandering over to the client to like look at their screen and get a feedback round, be like, do we like this direction? He would like lower the volume so that the photographer could like hear what the client was saying. And then as soon as the photographer walked back over to his camera, the music would go back up, and then we would all break for lunch, and he would play like smooth jazz. So everybody could like chill and calm down for a second, because it's like loud music all day long on set can be quite taxing. So like lunch hour is like where everybody like takes a breather, but then after lunch he would like try to play something that would like wake us back up, because the second half of the day it's like you just ate and you're like, it's hard to sort of keep the energy going. Like everything was catered around just keeping the mood high and elevated, and making the client feel like they're getting their money's worth. Um, it was so fascinating to see, and I would have never really like understood that had I not been able to be in these rooms. And yes, some of it was silly, or some of it was hard to sort of relate to from my point of view. But I'm very glad I got to see it, because it does make sense, I think, and it like it just taught me something about the way you carry yourself as an artist, because I think a lot of us have this expectation that if we're working artists, then we can't value ourselves, or we can't appear to value ourselves at that level that other people in other high-paying professions do. And that to me is curious. Like, I think that's something to question here, you know? Like, why can't you be both? Why can't you show up as somebody that, you know, this guy made millions a year. He owned so many properties around the city. Like, he was living the life. Why shouldn't he carry himself that way and still be a highly valued artist? And this goes for other photographers that I worked for as well, you know? Like, you want to be valued, but you have to value yourself first, and you have to sort of allow yourself to create an environment that portrays you as such, that sets you up for success. Have a crew that has your back, that respects you, and know that you're allowed to get paid whatever you want to get paid, just for you to show up and do the thing you love, which is shoot the actual photos. And everything else, you're working so hard at setting up for yourself, like the business that you run internally and the opportunities that come your way. And I'm here to teach you guys how I'm doing that for myself, so that maybe you can do it for yourself as well. But when it comes to how you're being perceived by a client, and how sought after you are, you have to grant yourself permission to do that for yourself, because nobody else is going to do it for you. I used to think, if I'm a good enough, talented enough artist, all of that will be created for me. All of that will appear around me. And that is such an illusion. It's such an illusion. You have to allow yourself to want it for yourself and go after it yourself. I hope that makes sense to you guys, and that that inspires you guys to really think about how much do you value yourself as a lead creative on a set of potentially 80 people, you know, or somebody that gets paid whatever it is you want to get paid. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Tune back in next week. Check out my Instagram, where I always announce what the Rich Artist Fridays are going to be. You can give me feedback if there's a topic that you want me to speak on. And if you're looking for one-on-one coaching, slide into my DMs. I do one-on-one as well. And we're going to do our 8-week, which is the biggest program I do, an 8-week program of the 8 pillars that transformed my photography career, starting in the summer again, probably around June. So I'm gonna start teasing it at you guys, so you know it's coming back up. We did 2 last year, and it was such a huge success, and I think it's the most transformative program that I offer. One of the, it's the biggest workshop that we do, and I think it is the perfect foundation if you want to be a working artist and attract the opportunities that you're craving to have in your career. I love you guys so much. Thank you for tuning in. If you ever miss one of the Rich Artist Friday sessions, you can always rewatch them on my YouTube. I always upload them as soon as they're edited. And yeah, I love seeing you guys in here. Thank you for saying hi to me. And I can't wait to see you guys next week. Thanks everybody in the Instagram Live. I see you guys. And I love you guys so much. Mwah.